this time, I'd like to call on Commissioner Beecham for the invocation.
Let us pray together, please. Gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for this time where we can gather and do the business of Wichita County, Lord. We just pray that you guide our hearts and our minds to do the right thing, Lord, to do your will for Wichita County. We just pray for our first responders and our military that are out in harm's way, Lord, that you'd watch over and protect them, and Lord, just help them to do the service that they provide for us, Lord. We just love you, and we thank you for loving us, Lord. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Y'all join me in pledging allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now the Texas flag, please.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Brother Bob always gets that wrong.
There's no comma. No comment. Don't take my word.
We say it with more passion this week. It's more passionate this week, Brother
It's going to be one of those, Judge.
We just passed through Texas Independence Day.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. And ask court to look at and take action on the consent agenda.
Very lengthy consent agenda, Judge. I'd make a motion we accept it.
And I had some questions, Judge.
Okay. Mr. Muller make a motion.
One of those two guys.
I heard an echo, I just couldn't figure out where. Okay. Commissioner Watts, which I.
The first was item 3. I just quite didn't know what the grant entailed. Or is that actually for the...
It's a repetitive deal. We have to sign it every year. It's with the identification system and notification for who's in, out of jail, going out, and that's the one, I think, right? That on item 3.
Notifies the victim, Judge.
I think that's mainly dealing with assault, family violence type, or violent criminal acts on individuals. It notifies them that the individual has been released from custody or.
It's actually a Sheriff's Department type grant?
Well, it's a statewide grant. It goes to the county, but it's a function of the state to notify them to the victims, because they have to make sure through our records that the guy is out of jail or been released on bond, etc.
We pay them, reimburse us. I think it's the way that one works.
Yeah, and this has been reoccurring for
many years.
Yeah, a lot of years.
At least 2 decades, maybe longer. When it first became an exception in Austin, passed it to do that. That's what it's for.
Then item number 8, Judge, what was do we have an estimated amount of cost in that, or was this close to a final?
That is the final?
Yeah. I think that's the total cost of it.
That's all one shot right there. And that was the room past them, that kind of...
Well, it's right across the hall from the Veterans Office, and remember we have the lactation room that is carved out of that, and we had to go in with that wall up, and there's a door through there.
Right.
There's some other offices in there, and it was when we added the additional appellate attorney over there.
Okay. Okay. And then items 15 through 18 are calling for approval of a lot of things, but the only stuff that we have is the per diem.
The other was all charged to credit cards, so the only thing that the county's going to allow an actual check for is going to be for the meals reimbursement. The rest of it went directly on their credit card.
Sheriff? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I just have one request. In the future, any deputies, officers' names, it's not publicized, because that puts people at risk, because now everybody in the world who sees this, has this. I understand, but I've never seen things, you have to put a name in there, you can put deputy 1, 2, or 3.
Okay, that's the way it was sent up.
I understand that, I'm just making sure we stop that
Okay.
part.
All right.
It's officer safety, I mean, it really is.
No, I'm not arguing that at all, I just want to be sure, because the comment was made to me earlier, oh, well, is that something they're requiring from across the street? No. We take the items as people put them in, and we put them that way, and I, you know, looking at it, I wish I had asked that question, but when it comes out of the office that way, then, you know.
Well, to make it even a little more fair, I didn't see that. I don't look at all that when it comes over, I don't remember.
Was that something you wanted to send up for us to approve, Dave?
It was something that was told, we were told we had to have it
Who told you that?
at the auditor's office. That's why we said nothing.
I just, to me, it's overkill, the fact that we spend so much
They're
time.
following our policy.
Well, Judge, we don't put our stuff, we didn't approve to go to
You
VC
had-
Young.
okay, you had a travel budget that you had submitted in. We'd asked for that. I think we need to review that method of doing that, because we really haven't screened anything, turned anything down, or said, no, you can't, because often it happens after the fact. So we probably ought to review that and get away from it and say, as long as you're within your travel budget,
I agree.
you're fine.
I agree, because I wouldn't know any of this, and I'd rather hold David accountable to the fact that, hey, you're $5,000 over what you budgeted, versus as long as he's within his lines. I don't know anything about the need or non-need, or,
Well, all I can say is, gentlemen, you approved that. That's in the preface, that's what's approved, and maybe we need to think a little more when we're doing those. But we were trying to get some control on the travel budget, because it seemed like people were coming in, and it didn't matter whether they had money or not. They were coming back after the fact and saying, you know, we want this approved, and they were using it out of other lines. And-
That wasn't just sheriff's office though. That was-
No, it wasn't,
Okay,
it's,
okay.
no.
Well, I'll share you also, just to let y'all know that anything that has like Orlando, Florida, Las Vegas, or Los Angeles, there's no training, we're gonna send anybody places like that, okay? Because I had one the other day for a class in Orlando, I thought, no, 2-week class, not gonna happen.
well, I just didn't want the close proximity to hinder us getting paid to get the deal done, and as long as you were within those, lines, you should move forward, I would have thought.
Well,
And we have a lot, we have that TICO money also, it's about 13 or 14,000.
13,000 this
And generally we go through the county budget money before we get to that till the end of the year, but, you know, I think we go through the state money first and use.
well, yeah, that's what we try to get people to do, but.
And Judge, sometimes you write policy that seems perfectly fine, but when you put it into action, it doesn't function very well.
Kind of like our legislators do.
Very well, very similar.
But we can correct it a lot, we don't wait every 2 years to do that,
Yeah.
or 4, or 6. Yeah.
I spent the last week in anger management training in Orlando, Florida. It's a long experience.
Okay, did it work?
We'll see.
Yeah! Okay, all right, okay. Did we answer enough questions? We're ready to go ahead and take action on that item. Any other questions? Okay. All right, Commissioner, I agree, we probably ought to go back and revisit that.
Yeah.
Clearly get that one. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Beecham, a second by Commissioner Waller to accept the consent agenda items. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries 5-0. Okay, we are down to item number 1, which is review and approve the regular bills and payment.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Harvey, second by Commissioner Waller to approve the regular bills and payment. Any comments or questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries 5-0. Item number 2 is receive a presentation by Mr. Murphy Davis, CFA, President of Century Management of Wichita County's investment policy, current investments, and future conditions of the U.S. and local economies. Wow, we're gonna be here all day?
Yeah. I'll be much more brief than that.
Okay, we can tell, come on,
pass this
Forward
out.
95.
Yeah, would you much like to replace it?
You guys, I think, Judge, Commissioners, that you all are on Century Insights.
Yeah.
So this is a repeat.
You got two.
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
I'll pass that on. There we go, we got it, Kevin.
Okay.
I think there's another one here. One page.
Something I noticed, Murphy, that the person that sends this to us always puts a disclaimer, don't ask me no questions. You got any questions, you call Murphy.
Murphy, and that is Kathy Williamson. Is that, where is she from?
She's from here. And Kathy retired about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
She had some medical issues with her spine, and she said, I think it's time to go. So we're looking, we don't know how we're gonna replace Kathy, but
We know a Kathy Williamson, but I bet
Yeah,
it's
that's
different.
what I was
Yeah.
wondering about, if it was Burke's wife,
I bet it's
Kathy.
a different one.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's same name, but different lady.
Oh, okay.
pretty uncommon name.
But she's been with us for about 10, 12 years. That's Kathy.
I
Williams.
see.
Has been with us for 10 or 12 years. Should I just stand here? Or
Yes, sir, that'd be fine if you would, that way the microphone picks you up well, if that's,
Okay,
unless you
okay.
need to sit down.
Good question. We're not suggesting any changes in the policy, number one. It is the same policy that this Commissioners Court has voted on for the last 5 or 6, no, well, not 5 years. I think 3 years ago, we had some things that we had to change, that had changed on the statutes that it's covered under. But it is the suggested policy for the statewide county commissioners courts. We're making no material adjustments one way or the other on it, staying, in essence, it gives you enough general information that you can take any of the action you want that's within good, solid investment securities in the state of Texas, just like the other county commissioners courts across the state. There are some things that some counties do that we don't suggest, and we've never done them for the county, and that's got involved with derivatives, futures, forerunning type of financing. We think that's just not a good place for public monies, even though there are some, I think, that participate in that. Yours are straight through the county treasurer or U.S. government treasury or government agency guaranteed. You have the ability to invest in municipals, but you're not a taxable entity, so why buy a tax-exempt municipal unless it's yielding more, substantially more than a treasury or an agency?
So we're not playing with penny stocks.
No,
Yeah.
no. All of those things, that's why I think this Commissioners Court and previous Commissioners Court have said, let's stay with what the state suggests in this particular area. And we've made our credentials to the county treasurers. We have to make our disclaimers that we're doing things on an arm's length basis. We don't have any conflict of interest. We own no securities for any clients anywhere. Our individual clients, our bank clients, our municipality clients are all on an arm's length basis. We don't own any securities and never have owned any securities. So we keep it purely objective from that perspective. If we look at where we are in the marketplace, we spend a little bit of time this morning, and I won't go into the long detail, but I think from the perspective, and you don't have any big financing projects, unless we are talking about the ones that's already there, so those have already been taken care of. But as far as interest rates in general, I'm suggesting if you don't like where we are now, you're not going to like where we're going to be in a month or 2 months or a year. The rest of the world
we've got England leaving, the Brexit. They're having problems in their own internal government's offices of figuring out exactly how they want to leave it. But if you look at the euro and what's been happening with the euro, and you look at Germany, who is the primary country in that consortium or that agreement, Germany was 1.6, 1.7% last year. This next year they're going to be around 0.6. They are the strongest country economy in that euro. You have the rest of them that are there, but as far as interest rates are concerned, their interest rates are going down. We have China that's not in the euro, but it is the second largest economy to the U.S., and it will be the largest as far as gross national product is concerned. It'll be the largest economy in the world, probably within 3 years, two to 3 to maybe 4 years, depending on how things go. It's going to be the largest economy, not the U.S. On a per capita basis, they're roughly half of what we are. They just have a lot more people and a lot more people on GDP. Theirs is going to be the largest economy in the world. So we pay attention to it. But here a couple of years ago, they were at 9%. We're running at 9% GDP. U.S. is going 2 3/4 to 3. Well, it's 3% this past year. Just got the last quarter's IMPRI our announcement here about a week ago. So we're growing at 3%. They're growing at 6%, but they were growing at 9%. So they're doing this. The euro is doing this. The United States, we're not suggesting we're going to see that same kind of dip, other than the projected changes that have been in the mix for the last 18 months or so. And that is, we were going to grow at 3% this year, and voila, as of last Friday when they announced the GDP at 2.6 in the fourth quarter, that means we grew at 3.1% or so in this economy. When they started talking about the tax cut that was going to be there, excuse me, and the incentivization of that, meaning that it should generate a better GDP this year at around that 3% range, right in line with what they thought it was going to be. It's done. It's always been, after that first year, you're going to have a little bit of drop off in it, and we're looking at, so far the consensus is roughly 2.5 to 2.25%. So somewhere in the lower 2%, but still more than we have been earning. There we had 3 or 4 years of below 2% GDP. So things are picking up in the U.S. economy. We do not anticipate a recession in the U.S. economy, or a real drop-off from that perspective as far as getting down to like Germany is at 0.6 is what's their projection for this next year. So while the rest of the world is really kind of rotating is what the economists call it. They're having a little bit of a problem. We are, fortunately, we are not having that same kind of problem. And again, that 2.25 to 2.30 GDP is going to be right in line with where they were anticipating it would be. And I know that Bob and I have talked about inflation and what we're looking at from that perspective. We're seeing an economy that is just clicking off like it should be, not hyper, not lower. If you look at the core PCE, which is what the Federal Reserve looks at, they have for many, many years, personal consumption expenditures, core personal consumption expenditures. That is their barometer for the Federal Reserve's barometer for inflation. So they don't look at CPI, PPI, all of those other ones are nice to look at, but when it comes to setting monetary supply and what the Fed is doing, it's based on core PCE. For that period from 2009 for the next 4 to 5 years, we were not even anywhere close to the 2%, which is what they want to have. You'd like to have 2% for the real inflation growth because that's an incentivization. It just keeps things rolling. They don't want 4 and 5%, but 2% is perfect. 2% to 2.25% of core PCE is what their goal is. We've not been able to even get it up to 2% until this past year in 2018. We hit it 2 or 3 times, and we're at 1.9% now. But when we would normally be seeing inflation from an economy picking up and going stronger, we're not seeing that this time. This is the first time in the history since the Federal Reserve was formed that we've had increasing interest rates at a time when the inflation rate was not going up. PCE was 2%, was not even 2%. It was down 1.6, 1.7, 1.7. So things are different this time, but we've gone through a period where virtually everything in the world got turned upside down economically. What do we see happening from this point further? We would love to see an economy that generated enough rotation in the economy to get us to an inflation in that 3 to 3.5% range. That would be almost perfect. Currently, we're at 2%, and we don't see a lot of changes from that perspective. We're having, if the rest of the world, India, China, the European Union, if they're really trending down, we're still in a positive move, but we're having to do it in an economy, a world economy, that's actually compressing at this time. So if you don't like, as I was saying earlier, if you don't like the current rates, you're not going to like, I think, where rates are going to be in this next 12, 18 months. We don't see a recession, which is what we're starting to see in some of the foreign countries, foreign economies, but at the same time, we don't see anything that is going to be stimulative enough to really push the economy up and push it to higher levels so that we're going to see substantially higher interest rates than where we are now. So currently, we're saying these interest rates at these levels, and look at where they have, where we've come. When the Federal Reserve, they raised interest rates, and they didn't have any inflation, as I was just saying. Core PCE had a heck of a time for the last 6, 7 years, even getting at 2%. They raised interest rates because they were down at 25 basis points. It was too low. In case the Federal Reserve needs to be stimulative at all, they have nothing to do. When you're at 25 basis points, what do you stimulate? 25. You go like the European Union, go to the negative rates, and that didn't help them. So we're climbing out of atypical cycles this time, and as we see it, it's going to be difficult to see substantially higher interest rates from where they are now. And I hope I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, it means you're going to be investing at higher interest rates. But I'm suggesting to you, we think we're looking at some levels that we're going to see about these levels in and around this. If you get to 3% on the 10-year, you know, we're 270 right now. But if you get up to 3%, and we have a little thing where the top 60 economists always make their forecast, and we get the composite of that. And the 10-year in the second quarter of 2020, not 19, in 2020, what all of those economists, the top economists in the U.S., have suggested is we'll be at 3.25% on the 10-year. That's a year and a half, nearly 2 years out. I don't think, and by the way, they've been, every one of them, and all of their forecasts have been absolutely wrong throughout this period. I haven't seen or read anyone who was correct in 2008 and said, hey guys, this is what's going to happen. We're going to way up here on interest rates, then we're going to go down, we're going to go down almost to zero, and we're going to stay there for 5 or 6 years, and then we're going to come up just a little bit because the Federal Reserve is going to push rates up, even though the monetary policy, monetary growth is not growing as what it should be. There's nobody that has been right. But I am suggesting that the trend that we're seeing now, it is going to be difficult with the rest of the world having their problems for us to be substantially higher. I'm not saying we won't be in November, we were at 315 on the 10-year, at least 315 on the 10-year Treasury. We're at 270 now. We were at 260 last week. So we're seeing these kinds of numbers is what I'm saying. So when you see some of the things that Bob invests in, and it has a moniker on it at 2% or 2.25% or 2.5%, that means he's pretty much gotten everything that's available in the marketplace out of it. And we are hopeful that we do have a little inflation, that the core PCE grows maybe to 2.25% or 2.5%. That incentivizes good, solid economic growth, and money multiplier has an impact then. If we have the rest of the world not being as strong as the U.S., it's going to be difficult for this one engine to really pull, to make everything, all the rest of the world go along at a much faster pace than what we're seeing now. So we're hoping if we can get to that 3.25%, 3.30 or so on the 10-year at some point out there, we're suggesting to you, I wouldn't be bothered at all in your positions. I'd say, thank goodness, we're getting a little bit more of what normal looks like now is that, and that would be helpful to see a little bit higher returns than what we're looking at now. But we do not see major changes. We've been in this cycle on the 10-year from 2.5 to 315 or so, 320. We've been there now for quite some time, and we don't see a lot of variance from that.
Murphy, are we allowed to invest in renewable energy?
In what?
Renewable energy.
Boy, it would be about the only way you would be able to is because you don't want to buy an individual corporation, and I'd say it would be a difficult.
Well, I think that we ought to investigate that
Well,
real hard, because AOC says in 10 years we're not going to be dependent on petrochemicals, and we're going to be totally renewable energy. So
yeah.
if we can get a jump on it right now, we'll get in at the bottom, we can make some money.
Well, if it had something that were at least had the capitalization of what the U.S. and all the other things, you might could with tongue in cheek, but
Tongue in cheek.
yeah, but it wouldn't fit in your policy that you just determined that you're going to go with.
How do you deal with your strategies when you have nutcases like that? They come out with a new Green Deal, and they're, I mean, how does that affect the strategists that are trying to paint the picture of where we're headed when they come up with this crazy stuff?
One of the things that we do and the way we're structured, and we've just given Bob this next year, the notation, we will do all these things that we said, blah, blah. One of the things that we have that the bond brokers and stock brokers and all of those guys, they make, if you have a transaction, they make a portion of that on commission or underwriting spreads. Our registration with the SEC is an investment advisor, meaning that we can't take anything other than what we're paid a salary by every one of our clients. we don't make a penny more or a penny less. And when you give that kind of sunlight on all the investments, and we see something like you were just talking about, say, you know, this is not for public municipality. This just doesn't, yeah, it's treasuries, agencies, highest quality. We've always been that way and always will. But we do get, as you might imagine, all kind of flows into us saying, hey, have you thought of it? Have you thought, well, is it government guaranteed? Is it treasury guaranteed? Or is it agency? Or is it the highest? And you can buy corporate paper, but still, why do that when you're getting treasury and agencies yielding just about what Bob gets, just about what you're getting there, and not have to worry about whether or not it's going to be in business or not?
You think the increase in our economy was helped by some of the deregulations that were?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, irrespective, I'm not talking about a Republican or Democrat or anybody else.
Right.
But let's look at what happened on the deregulation and or the tax change that happened with John Kennedy, happened with Ronald Reagan, created major deficits in both of those administrations, one Democrat, one Republican. Major, you had to go 4 to 5 years of deficits that you created, but you're stimulating by giving people, letting people keep more of their own money. In other words, the government was saying, you are better at managing your own money than the U.S. government. You give it to us and then we redistribute. So each one of those tax cuts created major deficits for the first 4 to 5 to 6 years. And then you start seeing the economy, overall growth is enough that the taxes that they're collecting now with the expanding economy is large enough that the taxes are increasing, revenues are increasing because of the economy has been increased. So from that perspective, it has worked in the past. We're hopeful that it does work this time. And again, we're not saying Democrat or Republican, we're just saying the United States of America, we would like to incentivize the growth. And one of the reasons that this economy is continuing to grow as it is, as opposed to what I was just talking about in Europe and China, is because we did get that incentivized tax adjustment and policy, fiscal policy that was there. Monetary policy is all managed by the Federal Reserve. Nobody wants, everybody should recognize that. They are the ones that do the monetary policy, the Federal Reserve. And fiscal policy is one done by the governments at the time.
Murphy, the anomaly that you talk about increasing interest rates, even though they're not dramatic, with lack of inflation, could that be because we were at such low levels?
Perfect. That's it's only, and they.
When you're down, like you said, when you're down here, you don't
won't have them tell you this specifically. But we were in a precarious position for 4 to 5 years at that 25 basis points is where we were in Germany, and the euro was at -4/10. -4/10 even made things worse over there. They even stooped to the level of buying corporate paper as well as government paper. Our Federal Reserve bought Treasury and government guaranteed agency, Ginnie Mae's. And they bought those, and so all of those needed to be stimulants, and the governments did their job. But I'm suggesting to you in the European area, they have still substantially more problems than what we have here in the U.S. And the Federal Reserve, and they control the monetary policy without Congress or anybody else. They are independent. They did the right thing at the right time. They did buy treasuries and agencies to stimulate in that 09, at 08, 09, and 10 market to get this thing stimulated enough to keep it growing like it should have. So they now have about $3.8 trillion in their own portfolio, the Federal Reserve portfolio, and usually what the Federal Reserve does is they keep enough to make sure that the Fed fund level, the target range, which is 2.25 to 2.5 now, if you get below 2.25, they sell. If you get above 2.5, they buy. So they have to have a certain amount of money, resources, to keep that Federal Reserve right where they say it should be. This is where we want it to be. So in that period where we've just gone through, and again, it hadn't happened since the Federal Reserve was started in the 30s, they were, in essence, buying directly more than they needed to buy to run the federal, keep the Fed funds rate at that borrowing rate at that where they needed it to be. So when they were doing that, they did take extra time, extra assets, and bought directly the debt of U.S. only, U.S. government or government agencies. So now then, they have two things that are working in their favor to massage or to get these interest rates generally in the range, let it trade in the range we want to. They now not only can keep the Fed funds, which is the daily rate that banks, intra-banks, that banks borrow on an intra basis, to keep the Fed fund trading level at that 2.25 to 2.5. Then they have these other securities that are in their portfolio, and they were letting them start to roll off and not reinvest, which they weren't doing that 3 years ago, but this past year and a half, they've been letting those roll off a little bit. A couple of billion here, a couple of billion there, and after a while you're talking about real money. And it looks like what they're doing now is they're saying, let's slow it up a little bit. Don't go as fast. So you're probably going to see about another 2 or 3 months of letting some of that maturities, some of the bonds that mature, not reinvest. And they're going to let all the Ginnie Maes roll off. As they roll off, they're not reinvesting the Ginnie Mae portion, but it was only about 15 to 20% of the total amount of portfolio they had. But they've never done that before. In other words, bought more than what they needed to manage the Fed fund level. They now have another anvil in the parade here, in that they can let those not mature, or they can let all of them mature. That's at their discretion, and that's in addition to the money market that they're doing over here on the Fed fund level, for where banks borrow on a day-to-day basis.
We would have never believed this in 1980, would we?
No. You said it can't happen. Number one, the Federal Reserve would never buy that much in private stock that it didn't need to manage Fed funds, but they did that to keep the United States and the rest of the world economies stable. They did the right thing, but now then they have two instruments where they only had one before that they were depending upon. The only two that they have now is Fed funds rate, where that 2.5 to 2.25 is, and the other is a big portfolio that's larger than they need. But I think they're probably just saying King's X for now is kind of what we get for them.
I would suspect the banking business is pretty good right now. Seems like the spread between
It's very good,
yeah.
but it's getting a little bit compressed on the spreads,
Yeah.
because the rates haven't moved too much. And now then, if you want my business over here and you want to be a competitor over there, then you need to charge me a little bit less to get me to come over to you. So we're starting to see a little bit of disintermediation there to a certain extent, but banks to one bank to the other bank. The other thing that's happening, and it's going to happen irrespective of whether anybody likes it or not, is that there's been a consolidation that's kind of speeded up the consolidation in the financial industries, that you see larger banks now than what we've seen in the past. We were working 10 years ago for 2 banks that were $1 billion plus, and now we have 14 banks that are $1 billion plus. And part of it is, from a regulatory perspective, the bankers all have to do this, oh, and this, you know, it just keeps piling up. So the larger you are, the less of a factor it is for that individual bank. So I think some of it has to do with the asset growth, has to do with regulations and just the evolving of the economy. It's getting larger, larger institutions for it.
Gosh, Murphy, I love talking about money.
Murphy, I've got a
Yeah.
question
Go
on
ahead.
our portfolio. Is there, and I don't know maybe the correct term, but just a canary report that indicates to us that, you know, because our spread is, you know, from all the way upwards of 1 to Bob's found some money for close to 3, you know. Is there but the volume or the number of investments as opposed to a lower number or a higher number or a combined factor, is there a template for that kind of thing, or do y'all do that type of work on our spread?
Yeah. Well, the main thing that we suggest, and whether it's this county or the city or an individual client, you always need to be concerned about liquidity. You don't want to ever be in a point where you're forced to have to do something, because that's when a lot of times that we've seen over the years, that's right at the time when you don't want to do it, is when you're going to need it. So from that perspective,
They call that Murphy's Law, don't they?
yeah, I think something bad's going to happen.
Something like that, yeah.
But what you have in the county, and what we see in all of our portfolios, is there's a sufficient amount of liquidity, irrespective of what this particular little investment and this investment did. One of the things we always look for is the combined liquidity that you have. Maturity liquidity as well as market liquidity. Thank goodness some of the maturity, some of the securities you have on your banks, on your books, on the county's books, is now underwater. And why would I say they're at a loss? Well, they're at a loss because rates have gone up. And you're not having to get out of it or you're not having to have a transaction predicated on it. But my point is, there are always going to be losses and gains, but where you really want to make sure, and we always look at this from all of our banks, and we've we've fired ourselves from a couple of them that wanted us to do something that was not in our nature, and that is because what happens is it doesn't get you now, it gets you at some point later. But main thing we look at is the overall portfolio. Do you have the liquidity that's necessary for the size of the investments that your particular county needs, or the city, or whomever, or the banks? And if you do, then we just worry about quality. If you've got liquidity, number one, and quality, and that would be very close to being the same thing, then we're not as concerned about having to come out at some point when we didn't need to. Because if you had that liquidity and the quality was such that if you had something in 6 months you could sell it anyway, or if you had something in 2 years you could sell it at whatever the market was. Those are the things that really has been through a lot of these things too, that you just don't want to be caught in a position, and you're not, the county is not, it's in a great position. You don't want to be caught in a position to be forced to do something that you don't want to do, that you don't have enough excess liquidity scattered around to take care of it. So that would be my suggestion to caution, is not be so stretched out and limited out that you don't have an overall liquidity, secondary liquidity and primary liquidity.
And Bob keeps you keep Bob a short and a mid range, and then a mid range, and then a mid-longer term and then a long term. I mean, we have all of those stair step of investments that go on regularly, don't we? I mean, as far as from start to finish, so.
Yeah.
You, in that canary report, you mean like a coal mine canary?
Yeah, a canary report is something I know from the bank that Murphy would take the rates and swing them different ways to test how your solidness of bank could be, how they were invested.
You know, a lot of people don't realize, but from time to time, it's not unusual. It's great having a competent county treasurer. Because from time to time, Bob will come and he'll say, I'm looking at your investments. What do you got on the horizon? What's coming up? Just management, things like let's be advised, this is where we are. Anything out there I need to know about, you know, and I mean, that really, people don't understand that goes on, but it really does. And it's not just by accident, it's planned.
And liquidity can keep us from achieving that maybe gold star rate out there, but at the same time, we're balancing in a position we need to be in.
Called management.
No question. In municipalities, you have different projects that are going all different times. Some's a capital project, some's an ongoing maintenance project, whatever, individual to your individual districts. And you just always want to have enough maturity liquidity in addition to having quality, but you want to have maturity liquidity so we don't have an interest rate risk. With where the portfolio is now, it is in really good, solid investment liquidity positions.
And Bob's been speaking on the last couple of times about a curve. Bob, would you do a better job of explaining it? I've tried to a couple of times and I get it wrong, but what we're seeing a long range increase but a short-term decrease, and the intersection of that rate could mean some particular things for us. Do you have a feel, you know what I'm talking about?
You talk about a yield curve and where the yield curve is now, and there's even a difference for this yield curve than we've had in years past. Everyone, this is a period, we haven't had one of these before. We're even talking, Bob and I were chatting just briefly about this, there could be an inversion of yield curve. Well, the inversion of yield curve always has happened in the past when inflation was at too high a level and the Federal Reserve pushed short-term rates up to stop people from borrowing, because they said, well, all right, we'll push it in the 80s, it pushed it up into the 18, 21%.
Slow everything down.
Yeah. This time, it's different. We don't have inflation. We have core PCE, just as what I was talking about. It's just barely at the level that's the healthy level that they want it to be. It's not up at 3 or 4 or 5. It's at 2, 1.9, 2%. So a lot of the things that have been traditionally canaries in the mine of saying, when we get an inverse yield curve, you got a really big inflation problem coming. This time, we're flat and maybe a little bit of a bump out on the 10-year, but we're flat in that 3 to 5 year. And there have been some day by day, depending upon whether the Fed is selling treasuries, 3-year treasuries or 2 years or whatever, you'll get a little bit of an inversion. But it's virtually flat from 3 to 5 years, and then you gain about 10 or 11 basis points out in 20 years. In 10 years. And this time, just don't be caught napping on this one, because it's there and there's no inflation. They would love to have a little bit of inflation to incentivize economic growth, but it's not there now, and we have the rest of the world kind of slowing down, as I was saying earlier. So this one is the different ball of wax, completely all over it. I still think that what I said earlier, it's going to be a difficult time to move up substantially, and I hope I'm wrong, because if I'm wrong, you're going to make more money on your returns. But I think if I come here next year, we might still be within 30 or 40 basis points, 50 basis points of where we are right now.
We'll feel better about a little inflation when we get that last block laid on that
Well,
LEC
that's
out there.
I agree, I agree. There are good ones.
A little nervous, but
Yeah.
not, yeah.
Yeah,
The tariffs that Trump put on steel has really affected the cost of buildings and stuff here, up about 33%.
yeah. And one of the things that's happening is that all buildings are, you know, it is a good, solid economic growth, and you have competition. We're building this building, you're building that building. Well, I have to charge you more if I'm gonna take off people off of this one, I'm gonna put it on yours. Well, it's gonna cost you a little bit more. But I can say on the other side of that, it doesn't sound good when you're having to pay that extra. But if we have that payment that's coming in and it's costing us a little more, that puts a little bit more of inflation out there, and that helps us grow the economy so that the overall economy is better. It doesn't help us on this specific project per se, but it does mean that things are strong enough in the other parts of the economic world, in addition to right here in Wichita County, that are generating your competitive bid, because you put it out in competition with everybody else, and this was the best competitive bid that you had.
And hopefully it will sustain that out through the payoff period too, which is what you
Yes.
hope for.
Right.
Just build the economy, build the tax base.
Well, good, thank you, Murphy.
Thanks.
That was
Very
good.
Good to see you guys again.
Thank you.
I wish I could tell you we're gonna see some 5% money in here, but if we do, it's gonna be because I'm completely wrong. I think we'll see just generally more of the same. Thanks.
Stability's not a bad thing either.
No, it's not, it's not.
Even if we've never had it in that means before, yes. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Davis or Mr. Hampton?
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Murphy.
y'all very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, appreciate it. I remember when I walked out.
Item number 3 is discuss, consider, and take action to review, direct, and ratify the payroll of claims.
So moved, Judge.
I'll second.
What is Department 615? There's a person, I have. Historical Commission. What?
Historical Commission.
Historical Commission, okay, there we go.
You didn't know that?
He does now.
615 fund is actually a CSCD grant fund.
It's what?
CSCD grant fund, adult probation grant fund.
Oh.
So if you're, depends on if you're asking about the fund or the part.
415. Yeah.
415, oh, 415 is, historical commission.
Yeah, no, I was asking about, there was one person listed in 615 on the list of payroll items, and it was not coming up in my mind what that was. Okay. All right. Now, Ms. Hardy, which one is which, 415 or 615?
415 is, we just said it.
Historical commission.
No.
Oh, sorry.
615, is that the historical commission right here?
Is, no, it's not, that's the
It's a
grant.
grant.
I'll write it down.
Yeah, put it on your name.
I'll write it down on this paper, grant,
Okay.
Grant.
Linda,
415.
Linda, thank you so much for this payroll cost. It's an addition to our sheet, and that's a
Yeah, that's,
really nifty.
And Corey and I were just discussing that this morning, how we might even break it up a little bit differently, so we might have it presented different for next payroll. So we're always looking at those things, so.
see that our overall payroll cost in 561 is down.
Yes. I noticed that the
The
cost,
overtime is up, but the
Nancy, can I
overall
borrow your
is
pen?
down.
the cost per inmate went from 167.92 in, December, last of December. It's down to $70.14. How did we do that? That's amazing.
The thing about the holiday is, oh, did you want me to answer?
I can't answer that one, you
Well,
gonna answer that.
Well, but when there's a holiday in a pay period, they're still working the same number of hours, but since jail is a 24 hours operation, they're required to be there, so they're gonna get paid for that holiday instead of getting the holiday off. So if there's a holiday during the pay period, it's gonna inflate the cost.
Like Christmas and New Year's was.
Correct.
At that time.
Good, yeah.
When you catch a couple of them right together, it can really,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I think it was 167.92.
Thought we were getting a better caliber of inmate for a while. Okay. Any questions? We have a motion by Commissioner Watts, second by Commissioner Muller to approve the direct payment of payroll and claims. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries 5-0. Oh, the exciting thing we're gonna do today is open and take action on truck bids. as necessary.
Not very exciting because I didn't receive them.
We received,
When we get the,
what kind of truck were we bidding for?
It's a sale, truck to sell.
Oh, one we.
yeah, the one we were,
Uh-huh.
Did we not receive any?
I'll make $1 bid.
That won't do you any good.
we've already got a floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little better than that.
Should we, where did we miss the boat?
Actually, guys, that's exactly where we were on that last motor grader deal that we did. We had always sold those things private treaty. And I don't know if it was because the trade bid was that good or just where people were, but that's the first one we've not sold private treaty for a long time. It went back to Caterpillar. So maybe this is the same scenario. That's a decent bid on that truck, but we thought maybe there was $5,000 or $10,000 laying on the table. Maybe there's not.
Could we go ahead and then take action to, motion to
Execute.
accept the trade-in bid on that?
So moved.
Second.
But it's good to try, because,
Yep.
Well, we've had them out of left field before that
Yeah.
have been.
you know, guys, sometimes that stuff's seasonal. That does have an effect on it. We're coming off of a time of extended wet weather, and, you know, there's been it's a little slower time for people than it will be here in 30 or 45 days. So, I mean, sometimes that plays into it.
But it's still good to go out for bids on that stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
For like my motor grader, you know, we were gonna get 50, but we wound up getting 77.
Yeah.
600.
Long term, it's been good, but every once in a while, one of them.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Watts, second by Commissioner Harvey to accept the trade-in amount. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries 5-0. Item number 5 is discuss, consider, and take action to approve hiring a temporary front desk receptionist in the Veteran Service Office to begin working as soon as needed and continue working until December 31st, 2019, paid at an hourly rate of $12.50 per hour, plus temporary staffing fees with the salary to be paid by transfer from general fund contingencies in Department 405, budget as determined by the county auditor. This is part of Commissioner Muller and I met with the gentleman out of the Waco office, Gary, I'm losing his name.
Gary got his card, and I can't get
Yeah,
it.
anyhow, Gary Ivey.
Ivan.
And they are working on bringing back the state officer back in a certain number of days into the office area we have, and ideally to maximize assistance to that person being there. The regular open hours are 8 to 12, and we're closed in the afternoon to process those, and they do take appointments sometimes in those afternoon hours and in the morning to accommodate veterans that needed a specific time accommodation. And if we've got one of the service officers doing the front desk work, then we're losing their expertise and training while they're doing that. So we have a gentleman that is a veteran that has worked there before, looks like he's available to us again. They felt like he did a good job. And I would ask that we go ahead, we have taken that from what had been a full-time position to that 20-hour-a-week part-time position.
Make that
Judge, should we
motion.
budget this?
No,
in
so
our budget?
no, it's what's in
No.
the general fund contingency.
Okay.
One other comment, Judge, about that in that discussion. First of all, the veteran, the business for veteran service officers are good. It's not decreasing, it's growing. They're extremely busy, and there are several good things that come out of that meeting. For one thing, we did get a good report back on moving to that electronic
Yes.
stuff, and it looks like that's gonna happen.
And,
That should
and actually,
speed.
that's happened.
That's
Mandy,
happened.
Mandy, despite her digging in,
Yeah.
has realized that's worked out well.
I'm not, does that mean that we convinced, that Mandy convinced us that was her idea, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
But it will have a positive effect, and I tell you, they're doing a better job serving the veterans over there than we've done in the past, and this is a good move to keep the expertise doing what we need done to move that through there, and, I'd make a motion that we approve this.
Second.
How many people are in that office, just Randy?
There are two now.
But they have the third one, it'll be the state officer, head of medicine, and also may assign.
That's what makes that number two?
No,
No.
this one is a receptionist. There's a state person that was there. Years ago, we had two state officers,
I
two
remember
county. Okay. Then, it was some changes. We went down to one state officer out at Shepherd and one downtown. And then they pulled out the one out at Shepherd and didn't replace him, then took the other person and moved her out there 5 days a week. Well, very few veterans can get access to that office because they aren't retired, they don't have a retiree, and if you're a retiree, your needs for that office are not near as great because you've already set yourself up, you're getting, military medical, you may, you may have some kind of claim to go back, but not too much, so, they had been putting that person out at the Workforce Solutions office, but nobody advertised it, no one knew they were out there. Somebody happened to wander in looking for veterans employment. So we've asked them to put that resource back down here with us for the majority of the time. They're working on that, and the second thing they agreed to do, there was some mix-up on records and on sharing the other county veterans office. They are gonna get her accredited. They've got the right amended, service records, and so that will happen. So then that'll be 3 officers can directly access the Texas Commission records and file.
2 from the county, 1 from the state,
Yeah,
and then we'll have a receptionist.
yeah, halftime, to go along with the hours they're open for walk-ins.
And this person here is half-time.
Yes, sir.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I got it.
Commissioner Waller, second his motion.
Yeah, Mr. Beechey.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries 5-0. Commissioner Beecham, update on the LEC Center.
Since I was not here last week, I do not have an update.
There's lots of dirt being
There's
hauled.
lots going on.
There's lots of dirt being hauled off.
So I will get out there and see what's going on.
We did get the water hooked up out there, and that was done. There were some other administrative things we worked through for them. It's moving along. That's it. To me, I like the weekly meetings we have. They've got an agenda, they follow through, they've got everything, the status of it put out there. And really, what was done this week is still a continuation of it. I can't believe they have meetings to be sure and coordinate and discuss the drilling of the piers. But
They have different trainings interacting with weekly and daily meetings, so.
I was out there on site this week, just, checking some various things out. They did run into some rock issues. The dirt contractor brought his milling machine in to try to get through, and I think they smoked all the belts on it, so that was not good. But he said that it looks as though they're gonna be able to work through it. They were a little concerned when they first struck that. We didn't expect it, but it's there. They're making progress, and they're setting rebar and running concrete, so there's progress going on.
Last report I'd heard, and all their piers, they hit groundwater at about 8 feet, so
Yeah.
they're gonna have to sleeve all the piers.
61 out of 90 or something.
As they move north, they're getting away from the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
as they're moving
But
forward.
that could wind up being a real good resource down the road if the water table is there. There could be a time, boy, that would be perfect for our irrigation
Yeah,
stuff.
certainly.
And, so that could be a resource that we may wanna,
We drink it, bird.
you know,
Well, we found the water table in the gun range, I mean, it
yeah,
stays,
it's there.
it's right there, so.
That could be a tremendous resource for us. And every time I look at those pink papers and I see that water bill, I realize what a resource that really is. It's a big deal.
All right.
We will be also, on a similar note, starting weekly meetings with the Amoresco project, I believe this week as well, so as they're getting ramped up. It'll also be on Thursday, so I'll include the report on that.
Yeah, I think Nancy and Joyce are checked out on window tinting for that project, so.
Now, Nancy's
Yeah.
still George, right in a little small place.
Window tinting in tight quarters.
Yeah. Okay. The only thing we were gonna try to coordinate Amoresco, look at those lighting up there, is try to make it kind of tie in with those plans for the remodel, see if we could, you know.
Right, we had discussed the remodel with Amoresco in the design, so essentially, they're not replacing any fixtures over in that area. They're just
Okay.
going to remove the ballast and put in,
Retrofit.
yeah, put in LED lamps that are non-ballast.
All right, that'll work out well.
Now, something that I learned is about the foot candles. And you need to measure your foot candles in your room, and when they replace it, they need to be as good as or better. Because like, one of the shops here in town did all LED lights. I couldn't see, it's too dark. We measured my shop, I got 70-foot candles. The lights I'm gonna put in, we're gonna give you 35. I said,
No.
no,
Right.
You won't like that.
you gotta make sure that you have somebody measuring the existing.
Sure.
You want at least what you got. I learned that the hard way. Can't see.
Also got like CRI and all kinds of other things.
CRI, can't remember.
CRI is essentially make sure that your colors are showing up correctly,
Oh, yeah,
and so you don't change.
like the different colored lights in here.
Yeah, you got 3 different color temperature lights in your room, so, which affects CRI.
Okay. Let's move down to public comments, anyone in the audience? Sure.
One thing on the gate, at the LEC, the Patrol's found a gate open a couple of times over this last week. It's been addressed with Glenn, he's gonna take care of it, I guess. Last one down, left the gate open a couple of times.
Okay, into the project?
Yes. Project.
Okay, that's not good.
Patrol guys there watched it pretty regularly.
It's
Sheriff.
dark out there now.
I noticed those gates are open on the east end of the building, in the front of the building.
East end of.
Yeah, there's really no access there, but it's, from the yard fence on the east side, the Beacon Insurance
Oh, yeah.
side,
Yeah,
those-
they've been that way.
will they not shut?
They probably can, they probably could. It's just they've always been open, because the back gate on the south end is.
It's always wide open.
Yeah.
The,
Yeah. We talked about that, I think with Bill Preston years ago, about need or should, and they said we got people coming back checking ACs and, you know, our guys coming and going all the time, so it's pretty
They
trouble.
come to the back gate.
What's that?
They come to the back gate.
Yeah, yeah,
Do
The
we?
gates on the front of the building where there's no road or nothing.
Right.
They're just like,
yeah.
Do
The
we
good thing
need
is,
that, or
it's
do we just-
well lit out there, the whole area is lit up, so you see.
It would be better if we made it solid, Mark, and it would
That's what I'm
support that wall, that fence wall better and give it more.
Yeah, we can get, we can
Rigid.
ship go out there and put a chain around it, lock it up, put a lock on it, put a chain and lock on it.
I suspect the lawn maintenance guys go through there, I would bet.
what they do too.
Yeah,
On the
that's,
right.
I went and looked at it one time,
Yeah,
because,
since they're coming back around,
Yeah,
yeah,
they do.
we get Shep to do it, he have to keep the lock, you know, keep the lock, so
Yeah.
it's just,
it'd be good to close it, looks better than the highway
Vernon
to have
Collins
it
still
closed.
cutting that out there.
oh, I didn't know him about
I think
that.
Vernon Collins still cutting it. Yeah, I asked Shep about it too long ago, he said, no, they cut it the last time. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, they were supposed to give us a lawnmower and we we're gonna cut it, so.
Yeah,
Maybe they'll get 2 new ones right before we start.
maybe they were riding around and trying to find us and finish them up.
I talked to the city attorney this morning about us using that parking area, and they're gonna draw up an agreement. I told them we would limit it to 1-ton vehicles, and the commissioners court will approve that agreement, and then we'll.
Well, they gonna draw it up, so I had didn't Henriette say that we needed to do something with
No, I think he wanted to know if we had, what the insurance plan we had, I don't know.
Well,
And I think they're gonna draw it, I think.
We'll tell them we had Geico, go ahead.
Kinley will draw it up. Kinley Hegland with the city
Okay,
attorney, he's
yeah.
gonna draw it.
That was the only question they had the other day in that 4B meeting.
Yeah. So, we should be in good shape with that. We'll work out agreement with Gates that, you know, one tons and below, and if there's damage, it's theirs.
I haven't seen either boy pickup, I've seen standard pickup.
It's regular vehicles.
You know, not driving other stuff down in the walk side and stuff.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Mr. Hampton?
Yeah, Judge, I just want to express my deepest sympathy for your untimely death of your brother. I'll never forget, in 2016, my daughter died on December the 21st, and my brother died 5 days later, both unexpected. And the folks here in this county that expressed sympathy and sent a card, I'll never forget that. She, of course, lived down near Anson, and the funeral was down there. So I looked down the church, and when I came in, well, there was Judge Gossam sitting in the audience. So anyway, just wanted you to know, so sorry.
Thank you. Commissioner Beecham?
Yeah, a couple of things. First, I want to thank the Express Soccer Club, Endurance House, and all the sponsors for the Express Half Marathon this past weekend. And thank Healthy County and Weight Watchers for making it possible for me to participate in that. I was able to finish my first half marathon. The winner of that event is a student out at Shepherd. He ran from Shepherd to the race.
Oh, me.
Ran the half marathon and ran back and set an all-time record for the event in doing so.
He's warmed up when he got there. It's cheap.
Much more, isn't it?
It's cheap, yeah, it took me last around.
And the female that won the female division was a student out at Aldous Air Force Base. So it brings a lot of folks from out of the community in. So great event.
What was the temperature?
Cold.
That's the incentive why he was running.
Cold.
Stay warm.
Will said he didn't get the invite for that run. He may want to get it next time.
Cold and drizzling rain. So
I hope Painter up.
Connor ran it, so saw him out
Yeah,
there.
he's been into those things.
He finished, I think, 8th overall or something really up high, so it was great. Tomorrow night, I want to invite everybody to Turkey to Tulsa, a tribute to Bob Wills. Turkey, Texas to Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a benefit for Museum of North Texas History, Bob Wills music, and talking about the history of Bob Wills and everything surrounding him. So, dinner, dance, chicken fried steak at the Elks Lodge, 6:30 tomorrow evening. I think tickets are $30. Don't quote me on that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It should be a really good event. Again, to benefit the Museum of North Texas History. 3 fiddle players will be great. Going to be really good. And also, do want to put in thoughts and prayers of former long-term county employee, Barry Lonka, and his wife is in some serious condition health-wise. In the Metroplex receiving treatment, so just have them your thoughts and prayers.
Both of them?
No,
Just both.
James.
Okay, Commissioner Harvey?
Saturday night, Redneck Culinary Academy had the honor of serving food to the Electra Annual Volunteer Fire Department's banquet. They graced us with a $500 check, a donation to the Redneck Culinary Academy.
Sure.
And we can feed a lot of folks that money. So awesome for them to do that. Greg Leland did mention that he had intended to run the half marathon with Commissioner Beecham, but got tied up and didn't quite get over there in time.
You know, if he'd been really in it, he'd have run from Electra over.
Yeah. So,
Little side note there also, Commissioner, let's not forget, Greg Lynn was presented with an award for over 40 years of fire service,
wow.
45.
yeah, 45, what did
Yeah, at least 30 of it was as fire chief, he's still current fire chief. And I got to speak there and talk about how I first met him when I was 18 years old in John Life Training in Electra, Texas.
18?
18 when I first met him, and talk about another fire we had over there. He wasn't fire chief, there was another fire chief, and he forgot that my crew was up in the third floor of the partners, and the whole roof was on fire, burning, falling out. We was upstairs, knocked the fire out. Fire chief then forgot to let the city fire department know they had a big snorkel ladder truck up there, know that we were in there still fighting fire. You know, they opened up them two big cannons, you know, about 10,000 gallons a minute. It will
Hard to breathe.
makes a different world for you, and the building coming down top of you, and you try to get out of it. It was a real close call. Several I've had like that. Greg assured me afterwards. He said, we look like a bunch of yellow jackets coming out that door. The stairway was pretty much straight down. It was an emergency. It was a stairwell, and we didn't all come running down it. We all come rolling down it. All five of us got tied up together with all the packs and everything on it. It was a lot of
Blew you out of there with the water.
a lot of bruises and scrapes and small injuries after that tumble, but yeah, I told him, I said, after you was running this thing, that wouldn't have happened. He's been a great fire chief, a great mentor to all firefighters in Electra. Electra's got a great fire department. It's one of the best. Oh, by the way, whenever they were looking for you to bring up the check, Greg was up front and he says, "Where are the rednecks?" And the whole crowd laughed and had some almost a power like, "There's a bunch of them sitting in here. Who are you looking for?" He was kind of comical. Y'all were out in the back still.
We were draining hot oil.
Hot oil.
The water.
Oh, okay.
They come out there to yell at us, so we can't, we're out in the middle, draining this hot oil. Fun though.
All right. Commissioner Waller.
The good news about that, though, at least we didn't melt a plastic jug this year.
Have a hazmat.
But, you know, what is it, when you have a problem like that, you invent something to fix it, and we did because of that, so now we
Well, I
got
wasn't
ammo.
there to contribute to that problem, so.
Yeah. The thing I liked about that deal is we actually got to go in and sit down and eat with the guys, and that was kind of neat. And you can't say enough about these volunteer fire departments, folks, because it's getting tougher and tougher to get volunteers. It's getting tougher and tougher to fund those departments because costs go up just like everything else. And quite frankly, they are the lifeline to the rural areas of this county, and they are so vital, and I think a lot of times overlooked, so we need to do everything we can to support them. And mentioning that, I'm noticing a trend that concerns me a little bit. I was watching a national television program, and they were talking about long-range weather Saturday morning, and guys, it's getting dry west of here. You go from about Seymour west, and they're beginning to look at the drought monitor again. And we're glad we missed the frozen precipitation this weekend, but there's going to be a time where that's going to be a problem when we got lots of fuel. We're into a windy time of the year. Please, please be careful out there. We don't need to get any wildfires going, and we've kind of set ourselves up to have that problem, and that's a good thing. It means it's rained and we've grown a lot of forage, but just be careful when you're out and about. But just appreciate those volunteers, appreciate what they do.
Okay. Commissioner Waller.
Well, hopefully this will give us maybe turn the corner on some cold weather, I'm hoping. And I'm anxious to get on down into March and through it. Barry says we're gonna experience
Cool.
wetter and cooler than normal
Yeah,
for this
March.
month, so worries me. We do have this afternoon, a fella coming, I can't think of the name of the company.
Todd Cliff, Energy 5.
Energy 5 to speak to us concerning some of the electricity rates we've been looking at, but I just wanted to kind of give the court an overview on where we're at this point in time with a couple of thoughts on what we've seen so far. We've received, and Willie, did you receive anything from Andrea? Did you? Well, she tried to email me, and I guess I need to get a hold of George or Ashley. We finally give up, and she emailed my other email address, and it went through just fine. And we had this trouble last time, and she ended up faxing Nancy. But anyway, what we've currently got going there, so everybody will see it in their minds clearly, is we have just over a 7-cent rate today, all things considered. Now, our rate is only 4.75, don't hold me exactly to that, it's not exactly that, but 0.0475 typically is what we're going to pay up till 2020, and a renewal, and then we receive a better rate for the next 5 years. We'll lose about half a cent off of that, and we'll fall into a rate of 0.065, and then what they're proposing, we could fall into a rate of 0.058. And I think it's critical to hold these people to some kind of cost. They can't do anything about some of those numbers, but nevertheless, that last rate that we're considering for the last 5 years of this deal could save us 1 year's worth of electricity, nearly $500,000 based off of what this cost projection is. So we're looking at a savings kicking off in 2020 of $55,000 annually, and in 2025 kicking off to a tune of nearly $100,000 annually. So we're in a good position. They could not, we had talked about some 10-year pricing that's come up. They were not able to find it in the marketplace with the exception of who has posed it to us. So the market didn't go out that far, but it could go out that far for providers. They are one, but they were not willing because of the uncertainty of the marketplace to go out that particular distance. But nevertheless, what we pay today is just over 7 cents, even though our rate is 4.75. And so that gives you an idea of the cost of other things involved in electricity rates. And that, so, you know, it all means nothing when somebody comes in and tells you, hey, we can give you a rate of 0.022 or 0.9 or all of that means nothing unless we come to the understanding of what the total cost is going to be.
Was it surcharges or?
It's surcharges that's called Encore is one piece of that. The rest is called congestion charges. So congestion rate and Encore rates plus the provider's rate equals the total rate. And we found that the provider rate, like Direct Energy, is just over 60% of the rate. The rest belongs to Encore and congestion. So, you know, to receive a rate from somebody and say, hey, that sounds really good, means it's zero.
You gotta look at all three aspects.
Yeah.
Mr. Beecher, do we know on our deal with Amoresco, are they based on kilowatt hours? If we're gonna, or are they based on price, on their guaranteed savings? That'd be something on look at.
I'll have to ask.
Yeah, because if it's price and we're lowering it, they're gonna get a false savings that they're passing on to us.
They look overall kilowatt hours or what we use.
That's what I was
don't know how
thinking.
they calculate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys. Judge, I was just sitting here thinking about this, looking at this the way the federal government would. Little dig there. Commissioner Watts, we don't want lower electricity rates. Our Amoresco project won't pay off as fast. Now, isn't that a typical way to look at that?
That's kind of where.
That's where we
Asking
are.
that.
That's right.
Commissioner Harvey had asked about a program that he has experienced in his business, and we, Mark, you can expand on it a little bit, but we do receive some incentive for these changes from Oncor that we are doing in the overall scheme of things that buy down our project, or it's figured into our.
Yeah, there were several buy downs that were included in that project. I don't remember what the total cost was in buying them.
Commissioner Harvey found that in his instance, 77% of the project was underwritten by Oncor.
We didn't have near that much, but it was a nominal amount, but it's still some.
There a little bit of help.
But no one can say that,
7% of my project.
no one can have that incentive but us, correct? The
Has to come back to the,
service coordinator cannot get a hold of it, can they? In any shape or form? No electrician could come in here and do some work like in the DA's expansion down there on the
Charge
second
you
floor.
retail and-
Charge us
yeah.
retail and submit the project.
No, we would be the ones receiving.
right.
I was pretty certain that was the case, but I just didn't know if there were incentives for contractors.
They filed the incentive on our behalf and applied it to our overall cost.
Interesting.
All right.
Oh, Judge, I thought one more thing before
Yes,
I
sir.
forget it, because I do that pretty regular. You know, we had talked a week or so ago about that brush lot next to the LEC where the mesquites are being cleared.
Yeah.
And I visited with him about that, and our dirt contractor arranged to get that done. And he's got a guy that's clearing that for us. We're gonna use that as a storage lot, so that's gonna be available to us, and that'll certainly be a big help. They're getting it cleaned up right now, so.
That's for the construction. And
Yeah,
for storage.
that, and they're gonna allow Yates to use it too if
Yeah,
they need
that's-
it for some additional
Yeah,
storage.
that's-
So I knew we had talked about that, but that's worked out, so that'll be a good benefit. And it'll make that area look better
Yeah, it's
when
no
that's all
cost, no
finished.
cost to us on
Yeah.
the project.
But it is gonna be available,
That's
so
a
that'll,
side benefit.
yeah, that'll work. I knew we'd talked about that a week or so ago, so.
You know, in the parking lot at the LEC, they're gonna make us put those gardens, the flowers and the trees and all that stuff. It only cost about $1,500 for Brandon Harrison to come out and drill a well and set a pump. You can water all of those islands and stuff.
Yeah, what no one's done is taken a water sample in all of this.
That's the first step.
Where you need a water sample.
And sodium.
See if
water.
it's
Determine whether you're pumping salt water or, you know, are we
We
looking
pumping
at
salt water in Burg Burnett and we're drinking that crap too.
Well, but they're running it through reverse osmosis before you get it under margaritas.
They don't have reverse
Well, if it's
osmosis.
saline in margaritas, it's pretty good then.
We don't notice it.
You have to put salt on
Well,
your.
you're on the same page, Lee. That's exactly what I was thinking about when I said a while ago about that being a good resource. We can wind up water in that
We
entire.
ought to try to,
But we've gotta go through the steps.
Yeah.
We could have it water tested, I'm pretty sure,
Sure.
with our testing agency.
You can send it to,
HR test.
but if we could get a sample while they're
While they're
drilling.
drilling.
in a
yeah,
hole,
yeah, pull a sample.
We don't pay.
David Graff can get it sampled. He does it all the
Take
time.
a mason jar to a stick, stick it down in there and put a
Because
mason
that
jar.
would be a good change order to add that to our irrigation.
Yeah.
You could probably save money,
No,
not having to pipe it from.
No, in the long run, I'm sure, yeah, if it's good, if it's not total salt water, which it may be part of the Seymour Aquifer.
It is, and it's got a lot of nitrates in it, but it'd be fine for water and flowers.
It's got nitrates in it, it certainly would be.
Okay.
Judge, just one final note.
We're a
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did reach out to Willie had gave me our, off of what Murphy was telling us and what Bob's been saying. Willie and Bob helped me make contact, and I requested a proposal from our Wells Fargo group over the extension of our tax note, and to look at how that compared to refund it as opposed to pay it completely off at a current rate versus a rate increased environment. And so he's going to send that to us and let us look at that and see if it makes any sense or not.
All right,
So.
that sounds good. Okay. My
We got
brother-
one more thing, no. I'm sitting too close, I better not do that. Sorry, Judge, go ahead.
That's all right.
Yeah,
My brother's funeral will be at 11 o'clock at First Christian Church this Wednesday.
Wednesday.
And the Eagle Scout presentation was probably one of the best, brought forward those proclamations, and that was one of the most efficiently run ceremonies I've seen out of the years I've been doing it. It was right in the top 5, so, and really 4 fine young men. Usually they give their Eagle presentation, and somebody had done, they had it in good order, they spoke well. It was certainly, I was glad to be part of that. I will encourage the scout office to let us know those when those are happening, so we can recognize those. All right, we do have a work session this afternoon, reconvene at 1:30. I've asked Commissioner Mahler to chair that, and I need to take care of family stuff. Not only this afternoon, but a lot this week. There's a training session that for the LEC for a safety briefing. I think it's Thursday morning at 8 o'clock. If any of y'all want to do that, we need to let them know, because I told them I can't do that.
Is that like for going on site?
If you want to be
or-
on site, you have to go through that. They give you a sticker to put on your helmet that you got that day out
Okay.
there. So,
It's not a helmet.
hard hat.
Takes about an hour and a half.
They were saying 45 minutes. Yeah. I know.
They-
I like your session better.
Yeah.
I have been through 5,472,000 of those, safety deals to get into the plants.
You still have to go to another one.
I know, I'm just saying, it's just.
All right.
That's Thursday morning, is that on location? I
It's
guess?
11:35, yeah, but we need to let them know today, so they're gonna you're gonna do that. We're recessed at this time.